right. Well, hopefully you found that interesting and it might be helpful. All right, let's talk a little bit about the newborn and how they eat. They will eat as often as 10 times a day. So imagine you've got a 24-hour day. They're on this ultradian rhythm, so there's going to be a bit of a cycle to how often they eat. So maybe they take a little bit longer nap twice during the day, but you're basically feeding them about every hour and a half to 2 hours is basically what you're doing. That's a lot of feeding for a brand new baby. It very quickly starts to decline. So you'll go from maybe 10 feedings a day to 9 feedings a day to, 8. I mean, like it'll get shorter and longer. Their stomachs will grow, their ability to tolerate, a larger, fuller stomach will go. So it will get better, but it's a lot of feeding at the beginning. By a month, you're going to be down to almost half of that feeding time. So you're going to be, within 4 weeks, have declined down to about 5.5 feedings in a daytime. That's the average. That's why there's a half. You don't go, okay, well, you only get 4 ounces this time. It's like, honestly, it's gonna decrease. Now, you can't talk about feeding a newborn without addressing the issue of breastfeeding. And so I've got this webpage that you might want to explore if you're at all interested in breastfeeding information. Oh, whoops, it popped up on the wrong screen. Hold on a second. Need to drag. Whoops, gotta grab that. Hard to drag. There we go. This is the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services website, and it's the Office on Women's Health. And they've got a really good set of questions and answers for helping women to decide whether they want to breastfeed at all, how long they should breastfeed if they're going to breastfeed. So I thought it would be kind of an interesting, useful thing to link in the PowerPoints for you guys if you want to have access to it in the future. But these are all research-based benefits to the baby, of health benefits to the baby that come from breastfeeding. One of the most important things, as I'm recording this, we're still in the coronavirus pandemic. It's January of 2022. And so obviously any antibodies that the parent has, that the mom has, will be conveyed to the baby through the foremilk. And so that's a really big advantage. So, for example, babies whose moms breastfeed them are actually protected from measles if mom has received her MMR and has antibodies to measles. So we can delay exposing the baby to a measles vaccine until 18 months because we believe that the antibodies that they receive from their moms will stick with them long enough to protect them until they're about 18 months old. So they don't need to get that shot until later, right? Which is an advantage. If mom ever had chickenpox, the infant's very unlikely to catch chickenpox because it's getting mom's antibodies. So really a direct benefit for breastfeeding. And then we have these longer lasting benefits. There's a lower risk of asthma among babies who are breastfed, or leukemia, the kind that has childhood onset. Babies who are breastfed are much less likely to experience obesity. One of the things that they think happens with breastfeeding is it teaches babies to eat until they're full and stop eating. Mom can't see how much the baby has eaten. And so she can't, look at the bottle and say, oh my gosh, there's so much more for you to eat. You should be, keep on going. She doesn't know how much the baby has consumed. And so if the baby stops eating and is done, moms are like, okay, well, it ate enough. And so, of course, moms who breastfeed need to breastfeed on demand because the baby may need to eat again in an hour because it really didn't eat enough. It got distracted or something. So, but it teaches babies what we call satiety cues. It teaches them when they're full. And so they're less likely to eat past that sensation of fullness and less likely to become obese. There are lower rates of ear infections and eczema among babies who were breastfed. It's not perfect. I got to tell you, my husband was breastfed for a year, his mom says, and he has eczema. So it's not perfect. In fact, my grandson developed eczema while he was breastfeeding. So obviously inherited that from grandpa. So it's not perfect, but it reduces the risk. Babies who are breastfed are less likely to experience diarrhea while they're breastfeeding. There's something about breast milk that helps to inhibit diarrhea. They're less likely to vomit, but it's not perfect. Again, babies might overfeed themselves and vomit because of that. So it's not perfect. They're less likely to have respiratory infections that are in the lower lungs, which, those are the ones that can develop into pneumonia that becomes deadly. They're less likely to have gastrointestinal tract problems that can like bind up their intestines and cause problems. In fact, babies who are breastfed are hardly ever constipated. They're less likely to die of sudden infant death syndrome, and they're less likely to develop type 2 diabetes when they're adults. So these is just like long list of benefits to the adults. There's certain parts of the breast milk that they talk about a little bit. I wanted to spend just a moment talking about the health benefits for moms. Because it sounds kind of counterintuitive. Well, I'm already fully formed. How would it lower my risk of type 2 diabetes? But the process of converting your calories into breast milk helps to work your endocrine system in such a way that you're less likely to develop type 2 diabetes when you get older. You're less likely to develop certain kinds of breast cancer, not the kinds that are genetic, not the kinds that, are independent of environmental factors. It's not going to protect you from everything. And it does reduce the risk of ovarian cancer. So mom has some very critical, very specific health benefits that come along with breastfeeding. I'm going to be honest though, there are some downsides to breastfeeding. It's time consuming. It's for some women who are not the kind who can like really sit still and just sort of let some stuff go by the wayside because I'm busy feeding the baby. My mom couldn't not do stuff. Like she can't sit still like that. And so it wasn't for her. Like it wasn't something that she could really do. And it was driving her crazy that I could do it because she's like, shouldn't you be making dinner? I'm like, my husband will make dinner if he's hungry because you know what? I'm feeding the baby. So it's like I had a much more laissez-faire attitude about things around me than she had. And it didn't bother me, things going by the wayside. And so I was able to just give myself over. I almost would like to call it an excuse. And so it's like some people can benefit in ways that other people can't. That's all I can say. It's another thing. Some women really struggle with privacy issues. You might have to feed the baby out in public, and some women don't want to do that. Some women have very negative feelings about their own breasts, and so they don't want to be breastfeeding because of that. I mean, there's a lot of reasons why a woman might not want to or feel capable of or be well suited for breastfeeding. And so one of the things I think is really important in the mommy wars that always exist is to give women grace for picking the feeding style that works for them. The formulas that we have available on the market are as nutritionally identical to breast milk as they can be. It's not perfect. Nothing's perfect. But nobody should be made to feel guilty for the way that they deliver their baby or the way that they feed their babies or whatever. As long as babies are thriving and doing well, that's all we can ask for. So I tried to give you pros and I tried to give you cons of breastfeeding. Now, this other issue that I wanted to raise has to do with the beginnings of personality. These are predispositions that we call temperament. This is not the same. The word temperament is not equivalent to personality. Personality is much more complicated, much more nuanced. Many more factors go into personality. Temperament are these pre-existing predispositions to react to the environment in certain ways. And so there are really three basic dimensions to this innate temperament that we're talking about. There's irritability, reactivity, and then activity level. So irritability would be a baby who is on the irritable end of the spectrum. Would be a baby who things bother them more. They are more likely to cry and fuss. A baby who's not very irritable, they very much go with the flow. They don't cry very much. If it starts to get a little warm, an irritable baby will start to fuss about that. If it's starting to get a little bit warm, the less irritable baby will kind of go with it longer. They might even get like prickly rash before they start to complain. So you've got like this different kind of level of irritable, kind of crankiness, kind of expressing displeasure. Reactivity is how much the baby reacts to stimuli in the environment. So how much they jump when they hear a loud noise or a puff of air on their abdomen. How much does that startle them? Those kinds of things. And so you have some babies who are highly reactive and some babies who are very unreactive. Like they just really, nothing bothers them. So you could be giving them little reflex tests. You could be giving them a puff of air. You could, clap your hands behind their heads. And a low reactive baby, none of this is really upsetting them. It really doesn't bother them. And then babies differ in activity levels. Some babies are very active. They move all their limbs. They're sucking on their lips. They're looking a lot. They're very, just very active. And other babies are just sort of laid back, and they're just sort of, they've got very little muscle tension going on, and they're just very laid back. So these are the three basic dimensions. You'll notice that laid back is a good way of characterizing sort of all three of the dimensions, right? It's kind of a hodgepodge. But I thought it would be useful to let you watch this video with Jerome Kagan explaining how certain dimensions of early temperament, which the person who posted it spelled temperament wrong, just FYI, that is not how you spell temperament. So how early dimensions of temperament measured in, very young infants, not newborns, but very young infants can be tested for this, can predict what kind of personality traits they might have as they get older. Now this is the last thing I wanted to say, and then I'll let you go off to the Kagan video, and that'll be the last video in this playlist. I wanted to talk a little bit about parental satisfaction with their baby's temperament. It turns out that that what really determines whether the parent thinks that their baby is an easy baby or not, if it's a baby that is like, wow, I thought it'd be a lot harder to have a baby, or wow, this baby's a lot harder to handle than I thought it would be. Really, that depends on how good the fit is between the kinds of things that bother the baby and the kinds of things that bother the parents. If there's a good fit between the baby's needs and the parents' capabilities, the parents are going to perceive the baby to be an easy baby. An objective observer might say, wow, that's a difficult baby. I had a friend, for example, who had what I would have considered a difficult baby because she was very reactive. If she was feeding, I met her when our sons were playing t-ball, and her baby was about 6 months old when this was happening. And her baby, when it was time to feed her, this mom was very modest and didn't want to nurse in public. She nursed at home, but not in public. So she would bring her expressed breast milk, and she had this heating pack and things that she would try and warm the breast milk up while we were out at the playing field. And if it was not exactly body temperature, the baby would not just spit it out, but would throw up because she couldn't take it. And this baby was probably, like I said, 6 months old to, by the time the season was over, about 8 months old. And she did it every single time. If mom could feel the milk on her arm, like if she put it on her arm and she could tell it was cold or it was warm, she knew, oh no, she's going to spit that out. She's going to spit up. And she would like make herself throw up. And I thought, man, that is intolerable. I don't know if I could handle a baby that acts like that. But the mom didn't see anything wrong with it because she was like, well, she should have body temperature milk. I mean, this is a reasonable expectation that my baby has. So for her, it fit. It was fine. She wasn't distressed by it at all. For me, I was like, oh my gosh, I don't know how you live like that. I couldn't have a baby that would make itself throw up if it was the wrong temperature. So, I mean, but mom was satisfied, and that's what matters. If the fit is good, then you're going to have parents who are satisfied. The other thing I wanted to point out with regard to temperament is that parents are oftentimes influenced by their babies. I called it rearranging the environment to suit the baby's personality, because the baby oftentimes will behave in ways that will cause the parents to change their behavior. As young adults, being college students, who most of you are probably young adults, probably not parents. Some of you are parents and can relate from both sides. But those of you who have never been parents before are looking at the world through the lens of somebody who was raised by your parents. And so you see your parents as having power, you see your parents as having influence, you see your parents as having imposed things on you. And it isn't until you have your own kids that you start to realize how reactive your parents probably were to you. Because I know with my children, I thought I was going to be able to sort of shape them into whatever kind of person I wanted them to be. And I would be able to sort of dictate, when they went to bed, and I'd be able to figure out, when they ate, and I'd be in a lot more control of things than it turned out I was. My children behaved in ways that caused me to alter my behavior to suit what they needed. And this dance that we're in as parents and offspring, as offspring and parents, is both sides are trying to get the other to adapt to, their own needs. Like me as the mom, I would have liked my toddler to take a nap. So I tried to shape her into being the kind of toddler who took a nap, and my toddler would not take a nap. And you would not believe the enjoyment I'm having watching her toddler not take a nap. But I tried to shape her. I wanted her to be working on a rhythm, a circadian rhythm, an ultradian rhythm that worked for me. It didn't work. She wanted me to behave in a way that she wanted me to behave. And we have this dance where I had to give certain things, she had to give certain things. It wasn't, now I realize looking back on my own upbringing, that my parents probably made me do this or that. They probably, you know, parented me within the confines of how I was parentable, probably. That's the point I'm trying to make. So, anyway, I'm going to go ahead and stop talking about parental satisfaction and let you watch Jerome Kagan and a couple of little babies. And I will see you in chapter 5.